of you know at least one thing you're not good at doing? See? That's a lot of you. I'm going to come right back to this, but before that, I want to talk a little bit about who I am. I am Poorvaprabha Patil. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm a medical student. I'm the elected vice president of India's largest medical students organization. I am also the winner of the Indian Healthcare Professional Awards. I'm a Woman of the Future awardee. I am a public speaker, an activist, a youth advocate, a researcher, a solo traveler, and a licensed scuba diver, among other things. Now, these are things a lot of you know or have read somewhere. What you don't know about me is that I tried to kill myself twice, 3 years back. 2 suicide attempts. That's how much I hated my life. The timing of it would be slightly unbelievable for a lot of you. A month before I wanted to take my life, I had scored 95% on my 12th board exams. I was the district topper, and it looked like I had everything going for me. But I was still deeply troubled by my own self. Now, if you're wondering how I got there, I'm going to tell you about it. But before that, I want to tell you a little bit about where I come from and what my childhood looked like. I belong to this beautiful little town called Ratnagiri, located on the west coast of India in the state of Maharashtra. It's a lovely place. I had a lovely childhood, a lovely family of 4. My father, my mother, brother, and I lived together. Now, this is the 6-year-old me. I loved animals, and I loved the park. I loved playing with my friends. I just loved not being at home. I loved every part of my childhood. Now, I was this big when I was sexually assaulted by a stranger in the same park that I used to play a lot in. Did I know what was being done to me? I didn't. I only found out years later when my mom was having a conversation with one of her young employees about inappropriate touch, abuse, rape, and those tabooed topics. And I remember thinking to myself very vividly, I thought, this has happened to me. But I think at that point, I was freezing in fear. And I was too scared to admit it to my mother, and it stayed with me for 10 more years. It took me 4 more years beyond those 10 to be able to talk about it in public. Moving past that, at 9, I saw the painful separation of both my parents as a result of unending turbulences in their married life, with a lot of domestic abuse and violence involved. At 13, I was thrown out of my school. Now, why is another TED Talk? But I was effectively homeschooled for a year before my mom found me another school that would take me. At 16, I found out that I had a rare condition that prevented normal growth of certain bones in my body, which I have to admit ruined my self-image furthermore, which was already pretty fragile to begin with. Now, we're coming to 17, which was pretty much the worst year of my life so far. I suffered from swine flu and dengue in the same year. It almost took my life. It did. Shortly after, I was estranged by somebody I was really close to at the moment. But this year, the biggest dream I had also came true. I had scored enough and cleared all exams it took to pack my bags and fly to my favorite Ivy League for the major of my choice. But, there's always a but. At that same time, my mom was going through a lot of financial turbulences, and I could not manage to go. And that broke my heart into a billion pieces. And all of these events that kept happening one after the other opened doors to so many feelings that I did not want to feel. It opened doors to sadness, to frustration, anger, disappointment, abandonment, and not feeling like I was good enough. Now, things like not getting into your favorite college, or suffering from a disease, or losing a loved one are things that people normally get out of after grieving about them for a little bit. But that wasn't the case for me. I just couldn't go back to living a normal life. The strength of my reactions to significantly small things was exponentially larger compared to normal people. And what I realized is I was living my life in compartments. I was pushing away feelings I did not want to feel or address, and only thinking and keeping around feelings that I wanted. And that did take a toll on my mental health after years of doing that. It deteriorated further and further to a point where I decided I needed therapy. So, my first therapy session, by the way, was in this city called Pune, which was 6 hours from my place. I was so ashamed of the way I was feeling that I decided I did not want to see a doctor in and around my vicinity, which is why we picked Pune. I couldn't say a single sentence without being interrupted by tears, not one sentence. And it took me significant tries before I managed to. At the end of the session, after my therapist had asked me enough questions and just spoken for a little bit, he called my mom in. He sat us both down, and he explained ACEs, Adverse Childhood Experiences, to us both. Now, I did not really know what these things meant, which is why I thought I'll do my own little research afterwards. But in the same session, he also told my mother that I was suffering from high-functioning depression, which is why it was all the more harder to diagnose it. I was performing really well, but I was just not well. I was put on antidepressants and antipsychotics the same day. Recovery was a really, really long journey that almost seemed endless after a point. And it took a lot of help from a lot of people for me to get back to normal. And this whole journey taught me a couple of things about life that changed my perspective and the way I look at it. And I'm going to let you in on what I learned now. The first and foremost thing I learned is that you need to accept and own your story, including all the struggles you faced. All of us in this room have gone through something that has changed us in more ways than we can imagine. A heartbreak, losing a loved one, losing a job, failing an important exam, or an accident. We've all been through something that was really painful and shattered us. We need to start accepting these as a part of us. You know, there are two ways things can go. Either you learn something from it and move past it, or you let it consume you. All the tough experiences I've had early on in my life so far has only enabled me in connecting and identifying with so many people going through tough times. I instantly connect with people going through mental illnesses, people whose parents are getting separated, people that are facing discrimination of any sort, people who are going through financial constraints and insecurities. And all of this broke me, but also made me a fierce activist. While a lot of people choose to not talk about things like these, it has made me a very fierce activist who does not shy away from talking about things like these, even at global platforms. The third thing is asking for help, which a lot of us are pretty bad at. We're afraid to ask for help because we think it makes us vulnerable. Now, help could be in any form. It could be professional help, like what I needed when I was battling depression, or it could be help from friends and family when there's just something that's bothering you. Before I get any further with this, I want to ask you, how many of you have somebody that's really important in your life? It could be anybody, your family, your friends, your significant other. See, all of us, almost all of us. Now imagine that you find out right now that you can never talk to these people again. Something's happened and you can never speak to them. How many of you will regret not having told them how important they were, or will regret not having said something to them that you wish you could? See, that's again a lot of us. This is where we get things wrong. We take people for granted. We take people who are trying to help us, people who are being around us for granted. When I opened up about my battle with depression after I was out of it, there were hundreds and thousands of people who reached out to me and told me how important I was to them, how much they loved me, and how much I meant to them. Had I known, I appreciate them a lot, but only if even 1/10 of these people had told me things like these when I most needed it, it would have made such a lot of difference. I don't think I would have wanted to take my own life in the first place. I felt useless and unwanted. And that's how every 1 in 4 people feel. Every 1 in 4 people across the globe suffer from some form of depression or mental illness. Now, just so you understand this better, that makes it 1/4 of this room that you're sitting in. That's how many people there are. And the thing with internal struggle is, not a lot of us see it. You can't tell what somebody is going through, which makes it so much more worse. Just a few kind words could make somebody's day. You never know who needs it. You never know who needs just a little bit of encouragement to keep going. Now, when I tell this to people, I hear from a lot of people, Poorva, that's creepy. We can't just text somebody and tell them you're really important to us. That is creepy. And I get it. I'm not saying I don't. So if you're one of those looking for an excuse to tell somebody how much they mean to you, I'm giving you one right now. The next minute you get to use your phone or to talk to somebody that's with you here, tell them how much they mean to you. They probably need it, and you don't know that. Now, for those of you who put your hands up at the beginning of my talk, this one's specially for you. I am pretty much targeting you right now. If you feel attacked, it's great. You need to stop punishing yourself for things that you aren't good at, and embrace what you are and what you have. There are a lot of things you're not good at, but when you keep telling yourself that, you're also convincing yourself that you can't get better at it. So when you're telling yourself you can't do something, you're pulling yourself down, and I want you to stop doing that. Fool your brain into thinking you can do something, you can do it better, and you will with practice. The final and most important thing that my little journey so far has taught me is that you're never too young, too old, too poor, too tiny, or not talented enough to move the world. You, just as you are more than enough to do anything that you set out to. Now, in the first sentence that I said, put in any excuse you give yourself for not doing things right, and it will still hold true. And the next time somebody tells you you're not good enough, I want you to tell yourself that they're lying. If I got a penny for the number of times people told me I was too young, I had too much time, I'm too tiny, I don't think I'd be where I am today. Imagine living in a world where we embraced ourselves for who we were, embraced everything about us, appreciated people around us, and did not stop ourselves from reaching our full potential. Imagine what that world will look like. I leave it up to you now to make that world for yourself and for people around you. Thank you.